The most ignored, misdiagnosed, and life-wrecking condition today isn't depression, it's not adrenal fatigue, it's your thyroid. It's why you wake up exhausted, can't lose weight, and feel foggy 24/7, even when you're doing a lot of things right. A lot of doctors will keep saying you're fine, but in reality you're not. And here's the part they never test for. Thyroid dysfunction. And that is exactly what I'm going to talk about in this video. What is destroying your thyroid and how to fix it before it's too late. Let's jump in. So the first thing we're going to talk about are some of the early signs of thyroid dysfunction that you may have, but you may not have connected to thyroid problems. Some of these are a little more well known, but especially when these things are all happening at the same time. That's when you really want to think about getting your thyroid tested. And we're going to talk about in this video the way to get your thyroid tested and why the traditional way of doing it really isn't that effective. And so some of the early signs of thyroid dysfunction are cold hands and feet, thinning hair, brain fog, little bouts of depression, dry skin, low sex drive, constipation, high cholesterol, which is really interesting because one of the thyroid hormones that we're going to talk about in this video is responsible converting cholesterol over to pregnenolone, which is the mother hormone, which basically converts over into all the hormones in your body. And so cholesterol is the sterol that actually is the precursor to all of your hormones in your body, and your thyroid, active thyroid hormone, is responsible for that first conversion, right? So if you have high cholesterol, that used to be the way they diagnosed hypothyroidism. Fun fact of the day. Cracked nails, and then exhaustion with 8 hours plus of sleep. Very common, okay? You kind of think of your thyroid as the canary in the coal mine. It's the first thing that's going to let you know there's a problem. And because of the way we have our system set up in assessment medically, it's so overlooked. And we're going to talk about why that is here in a second. And so the traditional test for thyroid is measuring TSH. So that's the thyroid stimulating hormone that's secreted by your pituitary gland. The traditional model says a healthy thyroid if your TSH is less than 4, which basically means the only time they would say that it's a problem is if it's over 4, which is really insane, okay? We really want to kind of omit that as a way of diagnosing thyroid. Dr. Ray Peat, who we studied with for 20 years, who was a master inside of hormones, thyroid, how the body makes energy, etc. One of the things that we've used over the last 20 years helping people that have thyroid dysfunction is we look for an ideal thyroid health. Dr. Ray Peat would say he wants it to be under 1, okay? And that is very rare for people. But once you start to do the things that I'm going to share with you in this video, you get that TSH to under 1, and you'll see an incredible difference in your metabolic health. So that's one major problem with the traditional way we diagnose hypothyroidism. So if you want to get a true look at your thyroid health and function, this is the panel that you need to ask your doctor to do. Unfortunately, a lot of the traditional doctors won't do this, but if you go to more of a holistic or alternative doctor, they'll be happy to do these tests. And so the first thing you want to make sure they're testing for is free T3 and free T4. These are the active thyroid hormones. We're going to talk about that here in a second. We also want to test for reverse T3, which blocks metabolism when high. So we got to make sure that that's not too high, the reverse T3. We also want to look at the TPO and TG antibodies. This is how you can detect autoimmune diseases like Hashimoto's, which is a very common thyroid dysfunction that can be categorized as an autoimmune problem of the thyroid gland. And then last, you want to make sure it's testing for total T3 and T4. So that's 5 different things that you want to get tested for, right? Including TSH, right? So we do want TSH as part of this. We just want to make sure the TSH is less than 1. And these are the things that you want to request when you want to get an accurate assessment or idea of what's happening with your thyroid. These are the things that you want to test for, right? There are things you can test on your own, which is also just as valuable. This would be the easiest thing to do, like right now, as soon as you finish watching this video, you could start doing this tomorrow. Two things that will give you an indication of the health of your thyroid and metabolism is your resting pulse and your body temperature, right? Same idea with resting pulse, 75 to 90. Like some of you may look at that and be like, wow, that's really high. I thought the lower your resting heart rate, the better. Well, again, this is a lot based on Dr. Ray Peat's research and where we've seen incredible results. Usually you think people with the lowest heart rates are the healthiest, the marathon runners, the cardiovascular, people that are really strong cardiorespiratorily. But when you really think about people that do long endurance type training, and I know this is going to be unpopular and I'll probably get some, unfriendly comments for this one. But like I said, last 20 years is what we found. They're stressing their system at such a high level, pushing their thresholds constantly. And, yes, these athletes are incredible, what they can do. But what I see when I've worked with these athletes are individuals that have an extraordinary tolerance for stressing the system. And one of the things that the body does when it's stressed, we're going to talk about this here in a second, is it lowers its metabolic rate to conserve energy because it's always being threatened, right? And so what Dr. Ray Peat taught us 20 years ago, and like I said, just, clinically and doing this with people, we found this to be accurate. When people have a resting pulse around 75 to 90, their thyroid tends to be working well, because you don't want your metabolism running really low. Like, you should be able to have your engines running and it be sustainable. If the system's constantly under stress, well, that's going to conserve energy and it's going to run the engines at lower intensity. Okay, that's where this idea of low heart rate is better comes from. And again, like, I'm just sharing with you what we have found that's beneficial. I know there's lots of different beliefs. I'm sharing this with you because I don't think a lot of people have heard this perspective. And I know, again, from doing this for 20 years, we found a lot of benefit from implementing these ways of measuring thyroid. The other thing here is body temp. 2 things you can do is, before you get out of bed, morning temperature, take your temperature, and it should be around 98.2, okay? We found that most people are running much lower than that, the 96s and 97s. Okay, afternoon temp, usually around midday, it should be up around 98.6. So this is something that I would recommend doing on a like maybe for a week, 10 days, just doing it every morning, just to kind of get an idea of where you're at, and obviously comparing it to some of your blood work. But this will really give you a strong indication of where your thyroid's at. So the bigger issue here with a lot of this stuff, and what I want you to understand, and I kind of just hinted at it, is just what really impedes thyroid function and creates thyroid dysfunction is stress. I call it the chronic stress cycle. On my channel here, you'll see me go through kind of the 5 pillars that create chronic stress and explain to you how it happens and all that stuff, so I'm not going to get into it in this video. But what I do want you to understand is that when your system is stressed, and I'm going to say chronically stressed, so it's been stuck in a stress cycle for a period of time. And so what that means is, this is another way to think about it, is your system is feeling threatened on a regular basis. So threatened, what does that mean, threatened? Like its feelings are hurt, like it feels like it's threatened because you're not being nice? No. It's threatened, meaning its life feels threatened. And so this is why we call, when you're in a stress state, it's survival mode. Now, there's a lot of people that are really good at functioning in survival mode. I mean, I am amazed at the tolerance this body has for getting things done, regardless of what we do to it. I mean, I know the way I used to live my life. I'm amazed that the body hung in there with me because I was not treating it well. My thyroid was in the tank. It wasn't pretty, right? But I did survive, right? And that's what's important. So one of the things the body does when it's in this chronic state of stress, it feels threatened, it's in survival mode, is it conserves energy, right? And this just makes sense, right? Like it's going to conserve energy because if it runs out of energy, it's dead, right? And so one of the way it conserves energy is the first thing it does is it decreases your metabolic rate. Oops. And that's why one of the things that happens is when your stress hormones are up, so adrenaline and cortisol are up, your thyroid is suppressed. There's an inverse relationship between adrenaline and cortisol and thyroid function because it wants to decrease your metabolic rate. Your thyroid is the governor of your metabolism. So it's like, hey, slow everything down here, thyroid. We're going to kind of inhibit your activity. I'm going to show you exactly how it does it here in a second. But it decreases your metabolic rate. If we're in chronic states of stress and we're chronically decreasing our metabolic rate, well, that's what creates hypothyroidism, okay? And the other thing that happens here, is other systems are shut down. We're going to talk about what those are: digestion, immune system, sex drive. All these other systems that are not critical to survival are inhibited because right now it's about surviving. It's not about thriving. It's not about reproducing. It's not even necessarily about eating or digesting anything, which is why when we're really stressed, a lot of times we're not hungry because it inhibits hunger. But I really want you to understand this idea that your metabolic rate drops, you're in survival mode, which is what inhibits your thyroid. And that's probably one of the biggest drivers to having dysfunctional thyroid. And that's really the thing that you want to address. And we'll talk about that in this video for sure. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about what exactly happens here with our thyroid gland. Okay, so your body, your thyroid is your body's thermostat. Like I said, it kind of regulates your metabolism. It's a gland right in your neck. It regulates your metabolism, body temperature, and energy levels. And there's two kinds of thyroid hormones. Okay, and this is really important to understand. You've got T4, which is an active thyroid hormone that's secreted from your thyroid gland. And then you have T3, which is an active thyroid hormone that's converted from T4 over to T3. So this conversion is very important. Okay, you can have T3 being produced, but it's not getting converted over. So that's an important thing to understand. One of the most popular thyroid medications is Synthroid. Synthroid is the T4 inactive hormone, but if your body's not able to make this conversion and we don't get to active thyroid hormone, right, the Synthroid's not going to be very effective. That's why it's important to do body temperature, heart rate, etc., to make sure that, and all of those other numbers in your blood work. Now, what happens when we're stressed is cortisol, a primary stress hormone, it actually blocks hormone production. So it'll block the secretion of T4 coming out of your thyroid, but it will also block the conversion of T4 to T3. See, this is where Synthroid may not get the job done. It might make your TSH look better, right, because they're producing T4, but it's not converting over to T3. This is why you got to look at the big picture here. And this is where stress can be the big rock here, and why it's got to be the thing we look at when it comes to any kind of thyroid dysfunction. How hypothyroid affects the body. I'm sure many of you can relate to some of these things, but these are some of the things I mentioned: memory decline, dry skin, constipation, irregular heavy periods, joint muscle aches, cold tolerance, weight gain, fatigue, depression. Now, the reason why I have this picture here is because what's creating all these problems is, yes, our thyroid is being inhibited, right? It's being inhibited, so it creates all these problems. But what's inhibiting the thyroid? Chronic stress. So if we think of chronic stress as the root cause, this is the cause, and it's inhibiting our thyroid function, and then all of these things are happening, okay? And this is what I see, for the last 20 years, is we have more people treating memory decline, and we have stuff for dry skin, and we have stuff for constipation, and we got stuff for this. We're treating all of these symptoms, okay? And the model will have you become dependent on all these things. It's like, well, as long as I use my cream, as long as I take that fiber, as long as I use those hormones, as long as I use that special supplement, my memory won't decline. I'm going to make sure I have my coconut oil. It helps with Alzheimer's. Maybe you know that, right? Like we're doing all these things to address all these problems that are being driven from this root cause. Now, one step better is, let me address my thyroid. If I want to address all of these things, let me first make sure my thyroid is working properly. Because if my thyroid's not working properly, any of these things can manifest from there. So it makes no sense not to just make sure you get the proper thyroid test, okay? But like I said, if you find that your thyroid is being inhibited, you gotta look at the chronic stress variables, okay? You gotta look at what are the things that might be creating my chronic stress. And again, on my channel right here, you can find plenty of videos that talk about the 5 pillars of chronic stress and what you can do about them immediately. But thyroid is one of the biggest things that can create so much dysfunction, and chronic stress directly inhibits thyroid function. Another way to think about this when it comes to your thyroid, okay? What kind of energy are you running on? Running on your thyroid running your metabolism, having that heart rate at 75 to 90, having your body temperature running at 98 to 98.6. This is your thyroid basically using the grid for energy, right? It's the most efficient way to make energy is if your house is connected to the electrical grid, right? Best bang for your buck. You're going to be able to run your whole household, all your appliances, super efficient, super efficient. Your thyroid does the best job out of all the ways you can make energy. Now, if you've ever been in Florida, or have been here during a hurricane, what can happen is during a hurricane, this can get shut off, right? We can lose power, okay, because of a problem. Well, a lot of people here in Florida, we have backup generators. We have backup systems that can take the place of the electrical grid because there's a crisis, there's a problem, okay? And so this is equivalent to your stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol. And adrenaline and cortisol are life-saving. They're lifesavers. They absolutely save us in situations. But I'm going to tell you, your body and your house was not designed to run on a power generator and adrenaline and cortisol. If we're depending on this system to run our house because this has been shut down, this is where all the problems come in. Everything starts to deteriorate. And so yes, this stress response, adrenaline and cortisol, our power generator, right? Very, very effective, very helpful. But we have to get this back online. Like, we're all so grateful when our generator kicks on, when the electricity goes off. We're like, ah, yes, this is amazing. Like, we get the refrigerator stay on. It's a lifesaver. But after about 3 or 4 days, we're like, okay, I'm ready for the lights to come back on. I hope the grid gets turned back on, because we know that the generator is not as efficient. It's a lot noisier. There's more, more noise. It smells. You got the gasoline, right? It's just not as efficient. But boy, it's amazing when it kicks on when we lose the power, okay? And so this is the problem with the approach, right? The common health advice isn't working because most everything that we're being told is how to treat all the symptoms from running on a backup generator, right? These are the digestive problems, the hormone problems, the fertility problems, the mental problems. The common health is ignoring the fact that we don't have our thyroid doing its job. We don't have optimal energy production. And because we don't have optimal energy production, we're using backup systems, which is the chronic stress. And we're creating all these different problems. I mean, I could create a lot more lines here. And we're spending a tremendous amount of money addressing each one of these things. And if you look at, especially in the United States, all of these things, cardio, respiratory system, immune system, I mean, you just name the system. And we're at the bottom of the list of health, right? Degenerative disease is at an all-time high. And it's also very, very profitable to treat all this stuff. Now, I'm not going to go into the rabbit hole of conspiracies, but we've got to call a spade here. There's a lot of money being spent trying to solve all these problems here. A lot. Okay. And am I grateful that we have the ability to help somebody when they're in really dire straits in any of these categories? 100%. I'm pro medicine. Okay. But what I will say is there's a lot of things that we're doing that probably don't need to be happening. Meaning we don't need to be at the place that we're in dire need if we address the actual problem. Whatever's inhibiting your thyroid and addressing the chronic stress so we can turn off our backup systems, get the system to do what it's designed to do, and see what's left to have to treat. Because a lot of times when you get the system doing what it's designed to do, it kind of takes care of this itself. The body's incredible at healing. But if it's in survival mode, it's not going to be worried about healing you because it's learning about surviving. Think of it this way. If you have a fire in your house and maybe your plumbing is out in your bathroom, are you calling a plumber or are you calling the fire department? Of course you're calling the fire department. Well, your body's the same way. It's going to think survival first, thriving second. Healing and repairing things is low on the list when it's in survival mode. So I hope this gives you a better idea of, one, what your thyroid does, how to actually test for it, which I'd recommend you doing if you have any of these symptoms. At least make sure that you've got these certain tests, your pulse, your temperature, like check in on that and make sure that your thyroid's up to speed. If it's not, I'm going to give you 5 things you can do here. 5 ways to maintain your thyroid health, okay? We've talked about this a lot. Stay out of chronic stress loops. Like, can't emphasize that one enough. Again, plenty of content on my page here to help with that. So make sure to check those out. There's a lot of things you can do there, but here's some other things that can immediately help you turn on your thyroid. Morning sunlight, like getting sunlight in your eyes in the morning is actually very pro-thyroid. It activates your thyroid to start producing thyroid hormone. Maintaining blood sugar levels throughout the day. So when your blood sugar drops, adrenaline and cortisol come out. Well, we don't want our energy, our blood sugar to be maintained by adrenaline and cortisol. You got to eat, right? So one of the things I share with people is make sure you're eating something every 2 to 3 hours. Preferably have a piece of fruit about every 2 to 3 hours. It'll help maintain blood sugar levels, very supportive to your thyroid. Number 4, doing 5 minutes of 4-second inhales and 8-second exhales 3 times a day. So why is this supportive? When you take a 4-second inhale in and double the exhale duration, anytime your exhale is longer than your inhale, you're activating parasympathetic state. You're leaving the stress state, which is known as the sympathetic state, and you're moving into the parasympathetic state of your nervous system, which is the rest and digest state. When you're in a parasympathetic state, rest and digest, your thyroid can come back online. So just doing that 4-second inhale, 8-second exhale, 5 minutes, 3 times a day, huge, huge impact on your nervous system, and therefore will impact your thyroid in a very, very positive way. And the last thing here is, try to stay away from things that are anti-thyroid, anti-metabolic. Avoid processed foods. I mean, you guys have all probably heard that before, but specifically seed oils. I mean, if you really start looking at ingredients when you go shopping, and you just don't take any product that has any kind of seed oil in it, you've eliminated probably 90% of the products in your supermarket. So this is like a big one here, because the seed oils are in everything because it's super cheap. And artificial sweetener. So these are just some low-hanging fruit, but I'm going to tell you, I mean, these are just good things for any of us to do. But if you really want to support your thyroid function, these are the big 5, okay? Sunlight, maintain blood sugar levels, that breathing practice, so powerful, and avoiding things that interfere with your metabolism. And definitely check out the things I have on chronic stress loops so you can step out of the chronic stress state, which is by far the most beneficial thing you can do for your thyroid.